Okay, so I'll call the January 14th PBC meeting to order. Start off with a roll call attendance. Nancy Toomey.
Here.
John Coop. Here. Greg Stepler is not here. Kirk McCormick.
Here.
Nancy Zimlock.
Here.
Mark Doxer.
Here.
Mike Nazaro. Here. Ari Greenberg is not here, and Pat Tompkins here. Okay, so first item of business, public comment. Is any public comment? Jim, do you know if there's anyone online?
No.
Okay. John,
And here.
someone came?
Oh, I'll go get it.
No, we're good. Okay, so just moving to the next item on the agenda, the approval of last month's meeting minutes. Have everyone had a chance to review those? Anyone had any comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion? Do a roll call vote. Nancy?
Nancy Toomey, yes.
Yes. John Coop?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Nancy Zimlock?
Yes.
Mark Doxer?
Yes.
Pat Tompkins, yes. So moving to the next order of business, the budget update and invoice approval. So Brian, if you can walk us through the
Yep.
budget update. and-
Jenny, can you
Invoices?
pull up the materials for that? So we continue to track within the budget for the current design stage. In addition to tracking the costs for the OPM and designer, I've also added the project communications task.
Would you like the construction project costs, or you would like the invoices first?
The invoices in the budget summary that was sent over. So, yeah, it showed, it was in your packet, but basically, the OPM is billed about a third of their fee so far, for this stage. For the designer, they're about 2/3 of the SD phase and about 3/4 of their overall contract. And the communications consultant, we're currently, it's just the video, we're about a quarter of the way through that budget. So everything is tracking within the budget. And I'll continue to update that. I've been working with Jenna to get some additional project expenses from even before this part, so we have the whole shell of all the costs to date. So I'll continue to update you guys on as that develops. And then we have 3 invoices that are up for approval. The first invoice is for Turner & Townsend Erie, and that's $11,130. And that's in alignment with our current billing schedule related to our contract, and that's for the work for last month in December. Then there's an invoice for BH+A for $70,000. And that work includes the billing for the geotech report that you received just before the last PBC meeting. And you also received an update on some of their schematic design documents that included a lot more detail than what was presented before. So you can start to see the outline of those drawings and specifications. So that work is included in this fee. And then the third invoice is from Cartoonin. I think that was $695. And that was for the first video. We're starting work on the second video now, so we want to get them paid. So those are the 3 invoices, and I think the total is $81,825.
Does anyone have any questions on any of those invoices? Someone like to make a motion to,
Do you need them for each of the invoices or for the total?
I think we could have one motion that, where we should probably list the 3 invoices and the total amount.
Move to approve invoices for Turner Townsend Erie of 35,080. I'm sorry, is that right? Yeah. Approve the invoice from DH plus A for 70,000. And approve the invoice for Cartoon EDU for $695.
Any further discussion? Nancy T,
Yes.
John Coot,
Yes.
Kirk McCormick,
Yes.
Nancy Zimmer,
Yes.
Mark Dykstra,
Yes.
Pat Tompkins, yes. Motion passes. Moving on to the monthly update, Brian, do you want to start with the schedule update?
Yep. So I'm trying to connect to this meeting so I can share some documents, but I haven't gotten there yet. So. Yeah,
Moved a
maybe
little
you
too
can.
quick for you, we can slow down.
I mean, zip it along.
Good time.
Well, that's exactly what I was about to say, that we definitely have been zipping along and really making a lot of progress. When we got started on this meeting, we knew that it was a pretty tall order to, try to get everything lined up for the April meeting. But, in our discussions, it was also clear that pushing things back a few weeks or even a few months would add complications to the town approval process. And likely things would really get extended even more because then you get into the summer and whatnot. And then we have additional costs related to construction escalation and then also just additional time for design and management. So the goal was to do our best to try to meet that April date, understanding that we may or may not. We were going to prioritize having a good, solid project, but do everything we could to accomplish that. And that's exactly what we've been doing. As a committee and all the working groups, there's been a tremendous amount that's been accomplished. So our last meeting was just about a month ago. And since then, despite the holidays, we've had over a dozen meetings. So there's a lot of effort that's been going into this. We had a meeting with the Council on Aging. We had a successful public forum right here in this facility. There were meetings with Reading's operations staff. We had 3 communications working group meetings. There were 2 stakeholder to sustainability meetings. We've met with police and fire. We had a meeting with the Burbank Ice Arena, to talk about, being good neighbors. We have meetings scheduled with engineering, planning, and conservation. And then we've also had meetings related to kind of pulling together all these final dates and really getting everything nailed down so that we can move smoothly through the process. During this time, the design team has also been working very diligently on bringing the drawings up to speed to get it ready for cost estimating. So you should have seen a significant step in your package compared to where we were before the holidays and what was presented at the public forum. So the key now is really to get this, the rest of the path, which is really about 2 months of work, to get that nailed down so that everyone can be on the same page. We can move through it smoothly and get the information to the town meeting and then ultimately to the town for voters. So it hasn't been easy to kind of tweak the schedule and all these things, and I'd like to review that with you now. Actually, has there been any additional feedback?
I didn't know, and I'm
Okay.
saying the clerk, she's
So-
reviewing it right.
Yeah, so we're still working with the town on the finalization of these dates, but we do believe that what I'm going to be what Jen is going to be presenting is in alignment with that. Actually, can you pull up the spreadsheet? So I'd like to kind of walk everyone through that, because that will help explain, besides just looking at some dates, like what are we really talking about? How does this thing really work? And it is a little complicated, so. I was using this spreadsheet as a tool just to kind of move all the pieces around like a puzzle and figure out how that all will come together. So there's a lot of data on there. So let me first orient you. So at the top, you have obviously the days, the dates. And then right underneath that is kind of the main phase that we're in at those different stages. Then you can see in orange, you have select board meetings. And then also as we move further to the right, you can start to see some of the finance committee meetings also kind of in the orange color. And then even further to the right, you have the town meeting dates. So kind of all those orange colors relate to approvals. So you have the warrant dates and then the town vote. If you scroll a little further, get into April, that's where we hit the town meeting dates and then ultimately the town votes. So that's kind of the first layer that we're looking at. Then going all the way back to the left, in yellow, you can see some remaining town department meetings. So you can see the FDPD meeting, fire and police. We have a DRT meeting tomorrow and then conservation meeting next week. So those are the yellow ones. In green, we have the public forums. And then blue are cost related tasks. And then the purple ones are the PBC meetings. So I think with a quick glance, you can see that we have a lot of PBC meetings in the next 2 months. So we've had to add some additional meetings to really get this timeline together so that we can go through the steps and the gears will turn nicely. So the workflow is as follows. We aim to finalize the schematic design documents and get those ready for estimating by probably tomorrow. And then start the estimating process. So the estimating process is a little bit longer than what we typically see. And the reason for that is we're going to be pricing more variables so that once we get the cost back, we'll have more tools at our disposal to kind of direct the project to the desired budget that we're looking to achieve. Starting then next week, we'll be coordinating a design review process. So our office will spearhead that. All of you will be included. We'll be sending out a package of design documents. And we'll probably be using two methods, either an online method for people that prefer that, where they can go and mark up the drawings with comments live. And for those who don't want to do that, we will have PDF drawings and specs, and then a form that they can fill out. And then we will gather all that feedback and send it back to the designer before we get to like the final value engineering stage and such. So those are all indicated up on there. So February 3rd, we'll have the initial unchecked estimates ready. So this will give us a sense of where we believe we'll be ending up on the costs and kind of a glimpse of what the project budget might be. And that'll be reviewed with the PBC at the meeting on February 3rd. Yeah, right there. And we'll be able to get feedback from the committee on the price information, even before it's final. So that kind of gives you a glance. So then by the end of the week, we'll have a clearer sense where the project costs have landed, because we'll have then reconciled the estimates. So just as a reminder, we're having a cost estimates prepared through the design team. with their estimator and then also through the OPM. Then,
Is it the end of the week of February 3rd?
this is
No, February 3rd.
by February 7th.
Okay, so that's the end of the week of February 3rd meeting, so.
Yes, yeah, correct.
My eyes don't close.
Yep. So then if adjustments are desired, so we'll have all the project costs. We will have the feedback from the design review. And with that information, the design team, the OPM will work together to put together some value engineering alternatives to consider if that's necessary, right? And that'll be ready for the next PBC meeting, which is scheduled for February 17th.
Right, that's actually President's Day.
Monday. Okay, is that President's Day? So we'll have to push that to the 18th then. So, okay, thank you for that.
Checking flexible select board.
Yeah.
It would be a conflict if you do it the select board. Because the select board is at 7. Yeah. We can do it at 6.
Yeah, we'll just have to move it up earlier. Otherwise, there shouldn't be a conflict, I think. So the 17th will move to the 18th. And the time for the PBC meeting will be what, 6 or 6 p.m.?
5. About 5.
5 o'clock.
They're asking you, Pat.
I could do 5:30. Let's go for 5:30.
5:30.
Okay.
Challenge everyone to get through it in an hour.
So the goal for this meeting would be for the PBC to recommend a budget. So we'll have worked through all the design issues. We'll have gone to the cost estimator, come back with not just one price, but on specific items, we'll have a number of prices right from the beginning, a number of alternatives. And then in addition to that, we'll have all the feedback from the design review. And we'll also have some value engineering considerations at our disposal. So with all of that information, we should be ready to decide on what the right budget is for this project. In the event that something goes wrong or we can't reach a decision for some reason at that date, we do have a secondary date lined up, which would be February 24th. So that would kind of include that part of the PBC work, which is a big part, is to get to the budget recommendation. That would then go to the select board. So depending on when those things happen, it could either be at the following select board meeting that evening, that would be the earliest, or it would be at the next select board meeting, which is on March 4th. So at that point, we would aim to have support from the PBC and support from the select board. We then have finance committee meetings that are starting on 5th. And we would look for a finance committee vote either on their first meeting at the 5th, or if needed, at a second meeting on the 12th of March. And then we would have all the primary approvals or support for this project heading into town meeting. Additionally, we'll need to prepare the warrant. So we've had discussions on that. It's a kind of a smaller piece to put the language together, but there's also a value associated with that. So my understanding is that needs to be pulled together no later than March 4th, which is before we would get the finance committee approval. However, again, we have all the cost information. We would have the PVC's recommendation and the select board's recommendation. And my understanding is we could also put in a range for the project if needed on the warrant. It doesn't have to be 100% final. So yeah, that's kind of the approval process. We talked about the estimating, we talked about the permanent building committee meetings. The other piece of this is the public communications. So Jen, if you could go to the left. We have our second public forum, first one in this year, scheduled for January 28th. So at that public forum, we will be reviewing building uses, updates on the design related to the use, really making it clear what this project is all about and really how people are going to be using it, visualizing it, all that stuff. All of it kind of coming together. When can I go there? What can I do there? How is that going to work? And then we'll also present some understanding of project costs. So we're not going to have final costs for the project at that point. We'll make that very clear. But what we will do is share some background information to help the public start to understand how project costs are derived, how we need to be careful when we consider numbers from this community or that community. It's all very relevant, but we need to make sure that we compare apples to apples. So we'll explain that process. And we'll also explain all the different aspects that go into the total costs so that they understand, there are contingencies that are built in. There's bonding and insurance, like all these things that help protect the public dollar. So that'll give them kind of a sense of where this project might land based on a number of projects that have been completed already in other towns. And I'll go over some draft slides of that a little bit later. So that's a lot of information. I'd like to circle back on this at the end, but for now, I want to know if there's any specific questions relative to this process.
One comment, just if you could sort of reiterate the, in the near term, the date any of the PVC members want to comment on the design to date, what's the date we need to have comments in? And also clarify what drawing set we should be looking at, just to
Yep.
focus
So-
on the what our homework is leading this meeting.
So we'll be coordinating the effort and we will send out the drawing set that will be used at the time. I'll be talking with Joel about whether we use the same set that went to the cost estimator or if they have, like a better set they want to use for the review. The comments will be due back at the end of January and you'll be getting those drawings starting about the 22nd. So you'll have over a week to look at them, including the weekend. So, this is schematic design, so it's not going to be like a real heavy lift, but there should be ample time to be able to work that into people's schedules, whenever they can find a few hours here and there.
Okay, I suppose we get started on the drawings we have now.
No, we're gonna get a set tomorrow.
So don't look at
Everything that says draft on it gets thrown out tomorrow's set.
all the work I did this weekend.
Make it easy.
Okay.
Change, but it's
Excellent.
just going to the estimator for a warning. Well, I left tonight at 6.
Okay, excellent.
So will that be the drawing set then that you
That's
want to
the
use
set
for the
them to
review? Okay.
Okay,
Now,
Great.
now, some of us have comments on stuff which is already being written.
So-
Will be reflected on the drawings. And when will we have the opportunity to, I have lots of comments on the structural
Yep.
design and on the geotechnical report of the recommendations, the foundations are, and I would like frankly to explore this with the geotechnical engineer.
Yeah, so there's two pieces. One is what is going to have an impact on, you know, the sizable impact on the project cost. The other is what is more, like, you know, the appropriate approach for the design and the direction we want to go. The items that are to affect the project cost, we want to talk about those tonight. And if need be, you know, there could be a follow-up conversation at our meeting next week. That would be the latest. So, but the hope would be that maybe we can talk about those things tonight. And the point of that is then, if there's something that we need to specifically address in the cost estimate, we need to get that to the cost estimator so that they can provide feedback on it. If it's something that is more related to how the building is put together, and it's not going to have a drastic impact on the price, those things will first be able to be addressed through the documented comments. That will also serve as a basis for the design documents when it moves forward, as well as the design development phase, where we'll get into more nitty-gritty, you know, detail about how everything's put together. So, to answer your question.
Yeah, it answered the question.
So because comments are due,
We're going to discuss it tonight, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if it's related to cost, if it's related to cost,
project costs.
Managing project costs, okay.
yes, then we're gonna be addressing those things.
And you don't have a chance to talk about it.
I would have a choice.
So if we get there and you don't, then we'll make sure you have a chance.
Yeah.
And just we're gonna get documents tomorrow. Thank you, Joel. You had mentioned comments being due the end of the month, just because it's the end of the month. If you have a laundry list of comments, John, beyond what we talked about tonight, is the sooner the better for everyone doing the design.
I
If you want to send
can
them over.
talk about.
Okay.
Okay, so that is our schedule update. And I think
Good.
we're on to the, yeah.
Just a couple of things. Thank you. The amount of work that's been completed by both the firms and everyone that's on the working groups, since we met a month ago is incredible. You guys did a great job at the last forum. You were both presented fantastic. I thought one of my takeaways, I sent you both an email. One of my takeaways, you were both extremely enthusiastic about the project. I thought it was infectious. I thought it was a great presentation. I could tell you're both very excited about it. The amount of work that's been done, I said this last month, and I'll say it again, the amount of work that we've done in 2 months on this, mostly you and the working groups is really, it's very impressive. Everybody deserves a pat on the back for that. So great job. Appreciate it.
Pat on the back.
So, I have a personal conflict on February 3rd, 10th. And wondering, so those are the vote meetings, and I can certainly hear my comments separately before. But if there's any flexibility, the 3rd might not, that looks like I'm looking at the 10th. That might be possible to work for other folks to maybe shift to the 11th. Again, if not, the vote meeting is fine, especially because it got moved off of a Monday. No, it's a Tuesday, so that worked. But my schedule now is I'm not in Reading or available those evenings at all.
Okay.
Meeting for me was important this is what we're gonna present to the select board on the 4th, and I thought the PVC should see that presentation, and I thought we should be discussing a range of the costs before we get public with this.
Agreed.
We can try to do it Friday afternoon. We're gonna have the estimate back in the morning.
And you can share it with me. I'm happy to, do whatever it takes to get you.
You know, I just don't want people to be surprised, and you know that they're gonna ask that question.
Yeah. I mean, I can work out over the weekend, not a problem. Take it back to you.
We want to go the 3rd up to later in the afternoon Friday and try to discuss the cost estimate, and just who knows what the number's gonna be from middle.
At that point, we'll have the cost estimates, but we won't have them reconciled,
Right.
No.
It's really just a preliminary review. So it's like, okay, we have this estimate, you know, this is kind of the ballpark where things are coming in at. What do you think?
I'm thinking you present the cost as a range to the select board on the fourth, and you finalize it on the eighteenth, but I don't want to go into the fourth and not have any sense of what the cost is.
I agree. I agree. We definitely need to have that cost. Which we'll have on the 28th, which is Tuesday.
Well, we're getting the cost estimates back 31st of January.
Yeah, 31st, and then they'll be reconciled by the next week, which is the 7th.
Okay.
So on the 3rd, so Mark, you can't attend. So do we want to change that, or do we just want to get your, I mean, it's kind of a general discussion, but
Yeah. I think we keep that meeting on, and I think you'll have to get some comments to us ahead of time. You'll probably be, we should be able to get you. We need to get,
the estimate would be, so that initial information would be sent over on Friday is when we're expecting that's going to be ready. So that way you also have a chance to review it before the meeting.
so you'll have to review it and give us, get in touch, give us whatever feedback you have on Monday. So we can sort of discuss on your behalf. We'll have to be posting that meeting. That should be okay. Okay. And we'll make sure this gets out, and Jenna had a Word document up there that has all these dates as well. If that's easier, we'll get some documentation out to anyone. And if there's some significant conflicts, we might have to move some things. Certainly if there's hard conflicts where we don't have a quorum for one of these meetings, but that's the plan right now. We can get them out.
Yeah,
Whoever.
but I will say, we kind of need to nail these down just for everyone's benefit in the schedule and coordinating with Killam and the town. So, yeah, so let's address, so that's the first one, right? So we have an understanding with that. We're gonna keep the third meeting on the 3rd. We're gonna make sure that the preliminary cost estimate data is sent out on Friday. In advance of that meeting, we'll be able to get comments over the weekend and extending into Monday before the meeting. And then the rest of the PBC will be able to meet with the quorum and provide some feedback. So then the other date was the 10th. So the 10th would be when we have the actual reconciled costs. So that's going to be a more in-depth discussion about what these costs are, and do we have any goals for value engineering? Are we comfortable with where things are? If we do want to look at value engineering, are there certain parts of the project that we want to focus on? And, you know, going to be giving direction to the design team and the OPM for that value engineering phase leading up to the next meeting, which is on the 17th. So that you have everything that you need by the 17th to make a decision.
And yes, I can move to Tuesday, the 11th. However much that. So it's not a slip.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
So,
We lose one day for the VE, but I think,
Instead of the 10th.
you good with that?
That's fine with me. Killam doesn't have anything that we're aware of. Was it a question, not a statement? If anyone in the room knows.
We have a meeting printing, this
I thought there was one.
Killam, me.
Yeah, there was some involved date.
Yeah, I have that on the 3rd as well. I'm having surgery on the 3rd, so.
Oh, there you go.
It's only.
Um,
I have some of the Killam dates on the bottom of this thing, but I don't think I have all the meeting dates. I just have their general, right there in white at the very bottom. You have, that came from the Killam project team.
Yeah, we have a Killam meeting on the 3rd on February 3rd. What do we, that's the meeting where Mark has a conflict.
Right. And what time is the Killam meeting?
Usually it's 7:30. So
Seven.
Seven.
Yeah, so we could meet earlier.
We can meet earlier, yeah.
We need at 6.
So 6 o'clock for the, oh, we're meeting at 6 anyway, right?
Is
Yeah.
1 hour going to be enough time?
Yeah, I understand.
So you want to push that to earlier at 5?
Yeah. 5 or 5:30.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's the February 3rd meeting?
Yeah.
Make that one 5 o'clock.
5 PM.
Okay, so maybe we can just roll through these PBC meetings on the timing and make sure we have everything covered then. So we have the one we're at now, right? What's today? Today's the 14th.
Nobody
Okay.
knows.
Yeah, okay, so that's that one. So then the next one is the 21st, and we changed the time on that one.
We have select board that day? Yeah, you do.
When do I get any money?
And Killen is on 22nd, I think,
Brings everything up. I forgot.
and that's when conservation.
So the February 21st, so what time?
6 is fine, I mean,
6 PM. Okay,
Yeah, 6 is fine.
January 21st, right?
Yeah.
January.
Yes.
January, yes.
then we have February 3rd. I'm sorry. March 3rd,
yes,
and we just said that that's gonna be at 5 PM.
February 3rd. Yeah.
Oh,
February
February,
3rd.
yes.
We have a 28th too. That's-
5.
okay,
20 is the
well,
forum.
yeah. Got it.
Okay, and then we have the 10th that moved to the 11th of February. So the time on that would be just what,
6 o'clock.
6? Okay.
Oh, someone just said,
Which is not the 18th.
why is it the 18th?
17th.
Oh, it's President's Day.
Right, that's not what we're doing.
President's.
So the 18th meeting time, so
It's earlier. 'cause it's
that's
select board.
earlier, right? So I think that one we also discussed having that at 5.
He said 5:30.
5:30?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's our first, so, we will have got the initial cost feedback on the 3rd. We would have updated the select board, and then we would have a meeting on the 10th to review the budget
Yeah, with actual costs.
with actual, reconciled costs.
Yep.
And then that'll be our first opportunity to say these costs are good or not.
Yep.
And sort of a decision point, are we good with this, or do we need to make some tweaks, or do we need more time to discuss? So that's,
So the 18th would be kind of when we're targeting the first vote for a recommendation. Assuming that you need some time either to make some adjustments or just to mull things over a bit.
like, if we're successful, we kept it on, kept it on for the 17th. And we were,
18th, yeah.
well, just.
Okay.
Like, is there any scenario where we're actually presenting to the select board on the 18th? Because even if we met on President's Day, like the select board's meeting 24 hours later, we're not gonna be able to give them enough information for them to vote on accepting our recommended budget.
Town halls.
Well, we can
So
prepare things in advance.
my suggestion is, do we avoid the conflict and go out to the 19th? Avoid the conflict on the 18th. So we're not gonna get on, I don't think in any scenario, we're gonna get in front of the select board on the 18th. Certainly not if we're doing a 6 o'clock meeting for a 7 o'clock
Yeah,
meeting. So in that case, does it make sense?
Well, if we do that, we're losing that first slot for the select board to vote, and then that only leaves one more, or maybe they do have another meeting on.
So one thing to consider, so while I think it's great to have all the cost information, get the board's approval in this window. For the purposes of the warrant, the final numbers do not need to be there. The warrant itself is proposing what's going on. It's the drawings, it's the activities surrounding it. And what typically happens is a warrant article gets approved. And then the kind of final information about it, final financial information about it. Has to be there ahead of town meeting, but doesn't need to make the warrant time. The advantage of making the warrant timing, however, is that essentially the public has all the info. And it's all. But there's not, the select board to vote on the warrant doesn't need the final numbers. That's kind of a separate. Entity that has value. And there still remains a question, am I gonna get whacked if I say this, let's see.
There's no way.
Is it?
Yourself.
The timing, yeah, so the specific timing of warrant articles, both for the school and for this project. Probably, my personal opinion should probably line up. My latest understanding, and folks who know better, I don't think that the schools are gonna be at April. I think they're gonna be at a special town meeting, or a special town meeting inside of it.
Inside.
Got it, okay, so it's actually a special town meeting, it'll have to have its own warrant.
Right.
Inside of the regular town meeting, which probably for our purposes, it doesn't make any difference at all. It's still in that time frame.
Just as a point of information, the town clerk just now sent her the town clerk sent her requirements just now, and I think they're pretty aligned, but I would want to have Brian and Matt check these, that they just came in now.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't want to say much, but she's saying on or before April 1, that we post the warrant for annual town meeting. That's just, there is a meeting happening. We post the warrant, it's posted in all the places it needs to be posted. And then the warrant is closed by the select board if there is that special town meeting on April 17th.
But for us, I think it's that.
The annual town meeting, select board has to close the warrant for annual town meeting on March 5. But we're gonna be on the special town meeting warrant,
So the dates get pushed back.
so it's, you get a little more time, and that's April 17. These will all be reviewed.
So we're gonna be at the same special town meeting as.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just that you don't have to, you can close the warrant later than the annual town meeting. That's what she's.
So,
That's-
so then the date is April 17th, right? To
Correct.
close the
We
door.
want to double check. We're just getting emails now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Check, but that's going to.
Probably a little bit earlier, it's not that, but.
Right. Oh, yeah, we didn't want to wait till the last minute. So-
Okay. So, but we still have the finance committee meetings, right? Those are standing, so
Yeah.
we want approval from finance committee, right? So even though the warrant date changes, that's nice to know, and that will help, I think, with the clarity on the warrant, but we're still driven by the March 5th and then the 12th. Those are the two times that we had to vote for the finance committee. So the select board would happen ahead of that. So we have two dates penciled in for the select board. One is the March 4th and the other is the March 18th. So if we're not ready for the select board on March 18th, that would only leave one meeting for the select board to vote ahead of the finance committee.
And even in February, don't you? Because finance committee is March 5th.
Yep.
So you can't meet select board March 18th, you're after the FinCom.
Yeah, it's February 18th and March.
She said March.
You had said.
Okay, I may have
March.
said, yeah, the wrong thing. I get confused,
You
but
got it right there.
okay.
I just thought you wanted select board to vote on a number before it goes to FinCom so that.
Yes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's
So
what
that's
we're
why we have
showing
the
up there.
yeah.
And then I wanted to get to the 5th. So that if FinCom has questions, you still have the 12th to fall back on.
I think that still makes perfect sense.
So then what we discussed though is on the 18th. Like the question is the select board going to vote on it and approve it in one meeting? Or is that too risky and we need to cover it in 2 meetings, because if it's 2 meetings, then we have to present to the select board on the 18th.
So the board has a preference for seeing items over 2 meetings.
Mhm.
Once is a chance to explore it a little bit, poke at it, and then vote on it on the second.
So why couldn't, so I think there was a discussion that we couldn't get anything to the select board on the 18th. But maybe we could get something preliminary, right? Like, this is
Yeah.
kind of where we are. And you have a chance to think about it and digest it. And if there's any adjustments, you know, we'll have that for your next board meeting. And we expect you to vote on it at that point.
Gonna update on design on the 4th, right, Matt? On February 4th, is the first select board meeting. Just.
Yeah, so that'll be a general update, but the costs are gonna be very loose at that point.
Right,
Right.
but
But-
still very helpful.
Yeah,
So let's.
so there'll actually be 3, I guess, if you
Yeah.
look at it that way.
Good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Let's move the 17th to the 18th. For me, I think we can leave it at 6 or move it up to 5, whatever the committee wants to do, it's fine with me.
Okay.
If anyone has an opinion on that, I don't think anything meaningful is coming out of that meeting and getting to the select board meeting that's happening almost simultaneously. Anything we want to present at that February 18th select board meeting, you know, we'll have no reliance on that meeting. It'll have to be decided at the February 10 meeting. Which at that point, at that point, we will at least have seen the reconciled costs. So we can put something together that we can,
Well, I think we can do the 10th. We can send out a package on Thursday of here's the presentation we're gonna show select board. So when we meet on the 18th, you've had a chance to see it and review it. You'll get it Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, I mean,
Nothing will be new.
I feel like most of the information can be already set
Yeah.
by the 18th. And we'll already have a pretty good understanding of where the PBC is heading on the cost. So it's really just about, is the PBC ready to say this is the number? And then if they say yes, you know, we can tell the select board, this is kind of what the discussion was, and this is where we're gonna be ending up.
So if that's the case, we probably should try to meet earlier on the 18th.
yeah, so the 18th at 5.
Okay, so we have 18th, then the 24th. That's kind of the backup date. So that one would be the 24th, or I'm sorry, 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once we have all these firmed up, which be this meeting and then I guess with this email, so I think we're pretty much there.
Yeah.
I'll send out an update with the summary, but I'll also send out calendar invites for all of these and then, you know, executive meetings for the agenda before that, all that stuff, so. Okay, and then from then on, I guess the 17th, we're back to our regular time, March 17th, 6 p.m. Yep, okay, from then on out, okay. Okay.
Excellent, thank you, great job. So, let's move it on, communications update, Katie,
Yeah, for sure.
told you you should be sitting up at the front row.
It's crowded. I'm very happy to be back. Thanks, everyone. Katie Gabriella, Director of Operations for the town. As Brian mentioned and alluded to, the communications working group has been hard at work, developing messaging, developing collateral, getting materials up on the website and distributing them to the community over the last month or so since we've met. I think we previewed it at the last PBC meeting in December, but our website is live. It lives on the Town of Reading website. It has its own dedicated page. I can certainly shoot a link around if helpful. Hopefully folks have had a chance to take a look at it. It's definitely a work in progress and we're constantly adding to it and building on it. The most recent additions were the recordings from the first community forum that occurred on December 17th, along with all of the slideware and the video from RCTV, the recording of that. One major part of the website that we're working on, you would notice now if you logged in that we have an FAQ up there. It's a start, it's 4 of kind of the top questions that were being asked about the project. We are working on a much more robust version of that based on feedback that we've gotten from communication committee members, feedback we've seen from the community, feedback we've gotten via email sent over to us at our new dedicated recal@readingma.gov email address, which we've been heavily promoting, so folks know that they can easily get involved if they have questions, comments, concerns, and we certainly have, as the new year has progressed, seen an uptick in usage on that email address. So really good that that's getting out there and folks are realizing that they can easily communicate their feedback that way. Some other ways that we've been communicating about the project, inclusion in town newsletters from both the town manager's office, pleasantries, both the printed version and the e-blast that Chris sends out on a weekly basis. Ongoing promotion on social media of our collateral, of the website link, and of those video recordings for folks who may have missed the community meeting in December. One of the things we're really trying to strike hard is the idea that the community meeting in December was certainly not a one and done. We did see some feedback that it's very close to the holidays, it's cold, it's late at night, etc. And like, lucky for everyone involved, there are many other opportunities for you to come and learn about the project and hear about the work that's ongoing. To that end, as Brian had mentioned, we have our next community forum on Tuesday, the 28th, here in this room. Our main theme, building uses and the design updates. So I know that we'll have the latest and greatest in terms of the renderings to show, and we have a great speaking lineup of folks from both town departments like recreation, like veteran services, and the Council on Aging set to speak about the various usage of the building and all the different ways that we plan on programming that space. So that is certain to be enlightening on a number of levels as we talk about, kind of the nitty-gritty in terms of programming. And then other than that, we're continuing our collateral creation, the FAQs. We're working with Dave Cartoonan on the next video to share with the community. I think we've seen some pretty good traction on the first one. That is also, if you scroll down just the littlest bit, Jenna, it's embedded here on the website, and it also has a fairly prominent place on the homepage as one of the main news items. We're promoting both the video and the upcoming forum. I know as we've just had a lengthy discussion about dates, we're still looking at the date for our third community forum. We're hopeful that we'll have that nailed down by the 28th, so we can continue that kind of theme of it's an ongoing iteration and there are many opportunities for folks to come involved and learn more about the project.
Great, thank you, great
Of course.
job.
Thanks.
You guys have done a ton of work. Anyone have any questions?
So the FAQs, we have those up now on the website.
Yep, so that's, if you click through there, Jenna, I think we have 4 or 5 kind of, the top frequently asked questions that we have up on the
It's on the
left-hand
left.
side, you'll see over in the nav. But we're working on a much more robust set of including everything from proposed hours to specific features about the building, including the gymnasium, things like that, that will go a lot more in depth and hopefully serve as a really great resource for, you have a question, you certainly can email, you certainly can reach out, but maybe it will be right here in the frequently asked questions section of the website.
Yeah, the frequently asked questions right now are from the recount prior, right?
I think Sharon weighed in on some of the bottom ones on, kind of cost estimating, so we could ensure that we had the latest from her and the best message in there.
Okay. And so when a question comes in, what's the process of getting that answered and getting it up on the website?
Yeah, so right now, what we've been seeing is folks have been sending us via email. The email goes to town staff at this point, just in terms of, it's kind of our best way to farm those questions out to the best person. We have 4 sets of eyes on it, so nothing will slip through the cracks. How we've been handling it, Jenna's been taking her first stab at these questions. We did have a chance to review some of them at our last communications working group meeting, which was last Wednesday. And we anticipate that we're going to continue that review tomorrow in hopes of getting these live and populated on the website soon.
Okay.
So if anyone on the committee has a question with an answer that they think should get up there, best to just send it over to Jenna or
Yeah,
yourself?
absolutely. And
Okay.
even if it's a question they don't have an answer to
Okay.
and would like some clarity on, we are happy to throw that up there for sure.
Thank
You
you.
guys answer all questions.
I mean, we have to, we will
I got all
have to.
kinds of
we'll
questions.
have- The secrets of life are outside our purview, I think, but as relating to the project, we are happy to take a
You'll
swing.
get an answer.
We just won't post it. Thank you.
And also, I think there was a process of getting some written feedback. Is that, get an update on that?
Oh, yep, in terms of like a suggestion box type thing. Yep, so we've discussed a little bit internally about ways that we can make it easy for folks who maybe are not as chronically online as maybe me, myself, and I am, in terms of written feedback, maybe here at the Pleasant Street Center, we're looking at the library and we're looking at town hall. Just kind of open-ended suggestions around the project so folks can ask questions, leave comments, that kind of thing. We'll also directing them to the website, should they be interested, and to the email address. So looking, yes, definitely looking at increasing the number of ways we're soliciting feedback and casting the widest net around information about the project.
Awesome.
Yeah, we also got some feedback from some Siskiyou Bus residents about having something during the day that's a public forum, so we're discussing with Chris here, the Elder and Service Administrator, on possibly having a lunch and learn like we've done in the past, to have the architects, if they're available, to come, or just town staff to inform that demographic that might not come out at night or be able to zoom in or things like that. So that was a suggestion that we're working on right now.
Thank you. So any other questions or any on the communications? Thank you again. Great job. Sustainability. Brian, did you want to give an update since Ari
Yeah, I
and
can.
Greg?
Is Dan on? Because he said he was gonna.
Yep, Dan's on.
Okay. So we did have a sustainability meeting today. There's been a few meetings since the last meeting, and Dan can kind of touch on some of the items, or we can kind of go back and forth about where we stand, but I guess I would just introduce it saying that, so the sustainability group has had a lot of very good input. There's a lot of qualified technical knowledge on that group. And what we're looking to do, or what we have been looking to do, is identify what are the key areas that the sustainability working group is focused on now, and how do those relate to decisions that need to be made at the current stage of the project, specifically with relationships to construction costs, because some of them will be dealt with in greater detail as the project moves forward when we get into the next design stage, which is the design development stage. So together with BH+A and the sustainability group, there were a few different categories that are of focus now, and Dan can kind of share where we stand with all those topics related to the building and sustainability.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Brian. Good evening, TBC members. As Brian alluded to, we had a sustained meeting, our working group meetings. There were 3 sessions to date. And for tonight, what I'd like to touch on, focusing primarily on what is being cost estimated as an alternate to the base building system, which you'll see in the upcoming schematic design cost report. I'll just quickly share my screen here. And certain part of building systems that are of major interest to the sustainability group is one, the building envelope. And there is a base building system of how the exterior walls are put together. Then there's an enhanced case where we are essentially adding additional insulations and to the walls, and those will be costed and currently specifically at alternate that you'll see in the SD cost report. That's forthcoming. Additionally, the windows and fenestrations often is another large area of improvement. We're meeting code. However, there are then an enhanced case where we're looking at a triple glazed window system that surpasses the code. And also, one of the questions obviously to the group is why do we need to surpass code, and why by so much? Part of the reason is that what we're trying to do from an energy perspective is to reduce the energy profile of the building. And this element, this sort of catch-all metrics called the EUI, energy use intensity, that effectively sort of defines altogether with these insulation values, sort of contributes to reducing that number. We're hoping to achieve a number of in the low 30s to a high 20s for a building of this type. We have similar experience with other buildings of similar size. So, and this is why in the cost estimate, we're trying to provide some enhanced scope in some of the areas that we could surpass, sort of, or add the performance of the building. And another area I think that we are focusing on the sustainability group is the HVAC system, and that being this current buildings being a all electric building, there are three areas or three sort of focus areas that we could go to, whereas we have a base building case, and then we have two additional alternatives being provided narratives. And again, you'll see these narratives as alternates in the upcoming cost report. So, and this is kind of what we've been working on with the sustainability group in looking at how to improve the overall building performance of this proposed building, and then backing that up was the cost report so that the team can make an informed decision as to how much to proceed.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you'll remember maybe from the previous sustainability updates, they started with exploring these ideas or exploring various approaches for these particular aspects of the buildings and weighing the pros and cons of various methods. And feedback was given about maybe the different mechanical systems. You know, what's preferred by the town? What are the pros or cons of using this particular system, both from the initial construction on through the ongoing maintenance and life cycle? So those were discussed broadly, and now we're looking to fine tune that with pricing to get us to the point where direction can be given. First from the sustainability group and then from the PBC on what we're going to move forward with on the project.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone have any comments or questions? Mark?
Just a question. So this is kind of choice of systems. Is there any opportunity or discussion of solar panels, or I saw kind of solar efficiency of windows? Have that moved?
So yeah, the building will be solar ready. Right now, we're not moving forward with adding solar to the building before we get, I guess, these costs. It's something that's oftentimes added later. If there's a strong interest, you know, from the town, absolutely it can be done, but it's adding another layer of cost to the project.
So can we within the residential light to understand if there are any opportunities or not, what grants still exist, how might they be interested or willing to participate? There's a way that they can collect the energy and pay for part of things. I know that this is in their current mandate, be thinking about this and looking at different facilities, evaluating where there's south-facing roofs and things. I don't know where our roofs are facing. But we should at least touch it. And I appreciate the issue of cost sensitivity. I fully appreciate that. But let's see what's possible and if there are other ways of paying for something.
So Joe, I think you were in contact with them related to what types of grants are available and what types of programs. And if I remember correctly, you mentioned like a $60,000.
Right, and I'm waiting to hear back whether or not
That's to happen.
they would do most of
as far as our understanding is it's per project per town. Once a year, you get a $60,000 grant from RMLD, so we have two projects potentially. So I don't think that they do any more than one
Mhm.
grant per town. It's split up amongst the member communities under RMLD. We went through this on our energy project we did a few years ago.
And what's covered by that grant?
Energy efficiency.
A wide range of things as
Yeah,
long as.
solar, it can be like LED, we did, the last one we did was LED.
Yep.
LED lighting up straight across town. So.
So you would ultimately propose something to them within the spectrum of energy efficiency.
Yep.
And they would say, yeah, we'll fund
Yeah,
60.
I have not heard back yet, because I posed a question about the two projects,
Mhm.
so.
So they probably wouldn't do the 60,000 twice.
I don't think so.
In the same year. That
Same.
doesn't include another year down the
Yeah,
road.
Right, and it's gonna depend when you go into construction too, right?
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah.
Are they starting at the same time? Probably not, but. I'm still waiting to hear back. I haven't got a determination. So.
So I think for at this stage, the building is gonna be designed to be solar ready. As we get these initial budgets together and we start moving ahead with the design, we'll be able to determine, where are we tracking? And if we feel like we can work that solar panel with the grant into it, we can definitely address that. It's a simple thing to add on to
The
the.
building currently, the orientation of the building doesn't seem to meet the optimum in terms of solar panel, or even solar gain from sun coming through the windows. You usually think of buildings to get the most benefit from the sun as having their broad face facing southwards and the slope of the roof, main roof facing southwards, but we don't have that. Is there a reason for that we have oriented the building in such a way that it doesn't have optimum possibilities for solar gain, either through panels or through windows? So can you comment on that?
I can, when I get the site plan,
Sorry.
if I have the site plan, I can, yeah.
So why don't we table that and we'll
Jen.
pick that up in his.
Well, I have a site plan here.
No, he's gonna go over that in a little bit.
On funding, and I appreciate, let's kind of take that as a side conversation. There are two things. One, we just become a green community. So at least with both major projects, we should be thinking about grant applications for those things. Those can be 6 figure. So, one of those little things. And then the other part, I think, is to go to our delegation state and federal and talk to these folks about the advantages of really efficient building and see if they're going to push on. So I know that the school side, the building systems pretty well about it. I can't believe that it's.
With regard to the green communities, there are some towns that are pursuing climate leader status. Wakefield is pursuing it, Arlington.
I think someone has pressed the mute button on the Pleasant Street.
Mr. Chairman, just to let you know, programmatically, the folks that are joining us remotely, I don't think can hear us. Maybe they can read us though, maybe.
Yeah, I put
No,
closed
no.
captions on.
Now we can hear you. It
Can you
was
hear me
muted.
now? Can you hear us now?
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we can hear you now.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So this is the second time we had a PBC meeting in this facility and the second time that
Good.
it worked. So
We needed your
we
facility.
need to get some new facilities here.
Advocating for our projects.
Yeah, just another reason.
Okay, do we have any other comments or questions on the sustainability update? All right, moving on to the stakeholder design update. Joel, were you gonna go through the plans? Nancy, did you have any?
All I was
Dates,
gonna say
you know?
is that we met on the eighth. I knew Joel will go through. I just want to commend. I came out of that meeting so excited about those plans. And he's done an amazing job of tightening it up. And just the vistas through, it's gonna be really a stellar building. I'm really excited about it. He did go over what I just want to mention. There was some concern about the growth of the size of the building from when the feasibility study was put in. So he did a nice chart to say where that additional, I think it's 1,700 square feet that was added. Ended up, and I fully understand, and our consensus was not to try and cut anything at this point, but to get the pricing first, and then we can look at it holistically. So, but I will say it's in great shape. I'm really excited. That's what we came up with. So
Thank you.
great job.
Thank you. Joel?
Is it just a stakeholder update, or do you want to see the pricing set for the SD set?
I think we want to see the pricing set. Yeah. You're on.
Jen, do you have the?
Yeah, the final one that you sent me.
Jenna has everything.
Cool.
She is.
Except for my tech skills. They could use them improvement.
So
Says you're
I can go to the next one on this. And do we have John Buell on waiting in the attendance?
Yes. He's here.
So
Yep.
Mayor is a structural engineer. Do you want to? John Buell is our structural engineer. Do you want to do the structural piece first?
Whatever, I don't care, yeah.
Just so we don't have to keep him waiting.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's go through to the working draw, to the schematic design set. Let's keep going.
Know what page it's on?
Well, not really. You have to get through the design piece and.
What do you want? Further? Further down?
Yeah, keep scrolling. Well, I need the S drawing.
Yeah.
We keep going down. Should I do it?
Sure. A lot of pages, so I don't know where to
Yeah, no,
stop.
there's a ton of pages.
I believe it's the last page.
29. It's the last page. There we go.
Roll to the end.
Yeah.
Always there.
And there's his spot in the packet.
I have two drawings here, then I'll get to the. There's at the last page in the handout was the structural design narrative, so they went through and they described in text. How the foundation system for this building is gonna work. John is online, who's the structural engineer. And the issue that we discussed at the last meeting was we now have the geotechnical report. And the organics and some of the fill on the site are such that we need better foundation systems than you might typically have when your building can bear right on the soil that's 4 feet below the surface. We have to go deeper than 4 feet down to get to a bearing point on the strata. So if you can just, unfortunately, the text block, yeah. There, so there, you can see the sort of foundation system. We don't typically have this level of drawing in schematic design. There's two very detailed wall sections, and they're there for purposes of defining the structural design for the foundation system, and for, as Dan mentioned, defining the wall system for how the insulation works on the exterior wall. Just as an aside, the reason that you need to do that is that it's not just making a fatter insulation or putting a different air barrier on. As your insulation grows on the building, this is the outside of the building. The things that are on the building that hold the facade up have to get bigger to accommodate the bigger insulation. So it's quite a complex calculus to do a cost estimate of going from 2 inches of insulation to a high performance 4 or 6 inches of insulation on the outside of your building. And you want the insulation on the outside of the building because when you go outside in the winter, you put the coat on your outside, not on the inside. In the old days, they insulated inside the building, which didn't make any sense. So now you wrap the building in insulation, and we're trying to fine tune what that value is for increasing the insulation and what it costs. And this is the first stage, this is schematic design, and the next phase will actually have an energy model and can give you much more information on this. So this is an ongoing discussion that we're in the first part of. But I'll let John weigh in here. You can see the inside of the building is here, and that is a structural slab that's 9 inches of thickness, I believe. It comes in and rests on a haunch, and then there's a foundation, and then underneath that foundation, there's a pier system. So there's 3 components to that edge. And can you bring John onto the?
Yep.
Yep.
I just asked to unmute you, John. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
All right, so John, I don't know if you have questions or if you want him to explain the system, how you'd like to proceed here.
Well, I can start off. The geotech, it's a segue into the geotechnical issues here. The site is not the best in terms of foundation systems.
Yeah.
The geotechnical engineer has found out that the soils, geotechnical report identifies the soils as being unsuitable to support the buildings. My question would be for her, if she were here, is, are there any ways of improving the soils, such as things like dynamic compaction or proof rolling? I assume that we're going to strip off 2 or 3 feet of soil right now, just in the normal removal of trees and the grubbing operation and bringing in some good gravel. There's nothing wrong with the soils except that they are not consolidated. They are recent soils laid down in the last ice age, presumably. They've never had an ice sheet over them, so they're quite loose. But they're stable. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to settle unless you put weight on them. And the question is, if we did some soil improvements by things like dynamic compaction or proof rolling with a big 10-ton roller, could we avoid the frame first floor slab? Now, we've probably got, in this foundation system, there's probably, I don't know, $250,000 of premium cost over the most favorable foundation system. So, you know, that's money which, if we don't have to spend it, we shouldn't spend it. And I don't think that's been looked at quite as closely as it should have been. I recognize and I agree that the major foundation elements, that is the exterior walls, some of the interior columns or whatever, whether we have walls or columns, they have to go down to bedrock, no question of that. But I'm wondering whether we really need a 10-inch thick frame slab, if we can do other things to improve the soil, which is a perfectly fine soil, it's a gravel, basically, it's not, there's no clays, there's no silts, there's nothing bad in there. That could save a lot of money. So that was my question, and that's really a question for the geotechnical engineer as much as the structural engineer.
Well, the structural engineer has had that conversation with her.
Okay,
So John can weigh in on that. We did discuss surcharging the site instead of proof rolling it, which is typically how we might weigh down the site. We did discuss ground improvements such as, helicals types of ground improvements with different forced injections of concrete or aggregate piles. She didn't feel it was a large enough site, but I'll let John talk about that. I'll also explain that we are having the geotechnical report peer reviewed to do exactly what you're asking, see if there are other alternatives. John?
Yeah, we did have that discussion because, and you're right in characterizing the site. It's a difficult site, and so normally, you go in on a good site, you expect to remove the topsoil, maybe a little bit of fill here or there, and bring in structural fill, and you do spread footings and a thinner, lightly reinforced ground supported slab on grade. But here, there's some pockets of deep fill, but then, as you pointed out, the natural materials are rather loose and not suitable. So geotechnical engineer didn't feel that the ground improvement was practical, given the soil conditions and given the size of the project. I think she was concerned that you wouldn't get many bidders on it, if any at all. And she recommended the ductile iron pipe piles. And so that's what we've gone with so far at this early stage, for this initial pricing exercise. So we have a structural slab that's supported on the building perimeter, plus with some interior pile supports as well. And then all the columns are supported by piles too. They go down to the weathered bedrock or bedrock. So, there's going to be a premium no matter what you do, whether you did deep dynamic compaction or you were able to do aggregate piers. There's definitely a premium for the site. I think our charge will be to really scrutinize all the options and see if we can get the price down, and maybe even a hybrid, as you suggest. I mean, maybe you can do piles at the column locations, but there's a way to improve the soil so you can at least do the slab on grade in the gymnasium, for example.
that
as
was precisely what I was kind of thinking of, is that you take the main loads down to the rock, which I think is, and the pipe piles are fine as far as I'm concerned. But the lightly loaded areas, such as the gymnasium, they're not adding any load to the soil that's there right now and has been there for hundreds of thousands of years. Maybe not that much, but so the soils are very stable. They are loose, but they are stable. They're not going anywhere. They're not this kind of soils which are affected by changes in elevation of water tables. There's no clays there. There's no poor water pressure issues with regard to settlement or consolidation of the soils. So the soils are very stable, but they're loose.
They're loose.
They would quite easily take the weight of a gymnasium floor.
Yeah, that's not a significant additional weight, and it's spread out over an area. So you'd remove, if you had pockets of uncontrolled fill, you'd obviously remove those.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
are
all I'm going to say is I'm glad you're thinking about these things and are not totally committed to a frame slab, which is going to add a lot of money to the job.
definitely, no, it's, it's too early to make any final decisions. I think we want to continue. I mean, we do everything we can to avoid deep foundations. A lot of our jobs, we do have ground improvement to avoid using piles and structured slabs. So we will do everything we can to avoid this, keep the cost down, because it just gets buried. So nobody gets any use out of it. So we'll continue to pursue that.
Well, some other comments I had about your narrative, I'll just go through them. They're not really substantial, but unless you bring them up early on, they tend to get overlooked. The interior walls are going to be wood framed with 2x6 studs. You could save a little bit of money by going to 2x4. The 2x4s are perfectly capable of holding the floor.
Yeah, I don't know that all of the stud, I mean, there may be some studs when we get done that are light gauge metal. I mean, typically, what we would do is the bearing walls would be wood and the non-bearing walls might be light gauge metal. It's easier to run electricity through the light gauge. The reason that they're 6-inch for now is that we inevitably have problems getting pipes. And the pipes want to go through the sill plate of the slab of the stud wall. And when you get a 4-inch pipe, it might be 3 7/8 inch diameter, but the flange that keeps the pipe from going through the floor is bigger. So we need to incorporate all that into the wall. So for now, we start at a 6-inch wall and then we can narrow it down if we need to.
I'll add another thing, it's the sustainability on the insulation, the 5.5-inch insulation on the 2x6 wall is sort of somewhat critical to meet the exterior wall insulation requirement for code.
I was talking about interior wall.
Oh, sorry.
The other, talking about sustainability, you specified the concrete as being 4,000 PSI. You know, you can save half a bag of cement per yard if you go to 3,000, and 3,000 is perfectly adequate for the interior of the building foundations, as long as it's not subject to frost. Saving, you know, reducing carbon, embodied carbon is a goal of the committee, I think. Save some cement, use weaker concrete is perfectly adequate. Things like that. These are very minor issues which can be discussed at a later date. Things like using bar joists for the roof of the gymnasium as opposed to rolled beams. You'll save some money there. Maybe the walking track around the gymnasium should not be concrete slab on metal deck. It might be wood. They'll save some money there. Little things like that. This is really too soon to bring up these issues, but since we're here, I think I'm bringing them up. Let's put it that way.
Oh, no, it's always welcome.
And piles, I think you said in the narrative that you would have a minimum of 3 piles per load point.
Right.
When you have a frame slab, you don't have to have 3 piles. You can have 1 pile or 2 piles because the eccentricity that you get if the pile is misplaced can be taken out by stiffness of the slab or the beams which run into it. These are kind of technical issues, but they have some cost implications.
Yeah, the column locations have a minimum of 3, but the slab itself will either have a single pile periodically on a grid, or I think we've got an actual integral thickened beam. So you have a pile every 8 feet or so. So yeah, definitely that's
well,
correct.
even the column locations, you can get away with 2 piles because you have this stiffness of the slab.
Yeah, you
can
can.
the eccentricity.
Yeah. The gym column.
Technical issues.
Yeah, you can orient the 2-pile cap perpendicular to the exterior wall. So
one question for Joel is, you've got the billiards room on the first floor with a wood frame floor. Have you done that before? And has there been any questions of vibrations and stuff like that?
So, Falmouth, situate, the billiards room on the second floor is quite common because it's noisy and.
With a wood frame?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
No.
So there's
The exercise room on the second floor and wood frame
but
buildings.
the main thing is the foundation because there's big money.
yeah, that's what we really have to attack, I think.
I'm sorry, the reason that John's going this way is that we want to have the pile covered in the cost estimate, and if we can get alternates, we'll get that. But given that we're going to town meeting with a number on a schematic design set of drawings, we don't want to go to the best case when we don't know if it can actually work. We want to make sure that we have the
Yeah.
most affordable, workable cost.
That makes sense.
Anything else, John?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. We do, concrete spec will have a lot of cement substitution. We use fly ash and slag in the mixes, so we'll have some targets for global warming potential in the concrete mixes. And, you're right. I mean, a lot of times we do the foundations at 3,000 PSI, but with the pile caps and everything, we usually use 4,000. And then we've been getting some pushbacks from contractors when they're, building through the winter and these things are unprotected and stuff, going through freeze thaw for several months and such. So, but we'll look at all that. I think all very good points that you made.
So maybe we just scroll down a little bit and one more page. You can see the drawings have a lot of details, so there's finishes on there. We're not expecting everybody's gonna look at everything. It may be that one person looks at finishes and you look at structural and someone else looks at the MVP drawing. But there's quite a bit of detail in the set. Again, we have one shot of going to town meeting with the schematic design set, so we're trying to be very precise with the information here. It's a little bit more than you might expect in a normal schematic design set of drawings. If I can go all the way back to the beginning, just scroll to the top. This first site plan. The reason the building is oriented this way was that, given the setback lines for the wetland, that's the limit of construction, we tried to put a building parallel and get it in an orientation that wasn't on its end. It made the parking very difficult on the site. And this is sort of a reasonable orientation, but it's never going to be perfect. If you had the building oriented here and you can get full southern exposure, you would have ostensibly the back of the building facing the road, and then the front of the building would face whatever parking we could get in here. So just the narrow site didn't lend itself to the orientation you might want for solar. This roof and this roof are candidates for solar. We could put a flat roof on the gym. Well, it was, the town probably, we understood the town wanted preferred pitched roofs for drainage and water control and maybe aesthetics, but the point of doing these drawings is if we want to do a flat roof, we can redesign that and have a solar flat roof. I think the comment about the area of the roof, I mean, it is a 15,000 square foot footprint. So it's somewhat there. But you could also, as mentioned, put a solar canopy down the middle of that, at not that high of a cost. The advantage of the solar canopy is that would have a more optimum orientation. It's a pretty common way of doing the solar. It's not a huge impact, but anything you can do to lessen the solar impact on asphalt is a huge benefit to the environment, especially the microenvironment here. So a lot of schools that get worked on end up with the solar canopy on that parking lot just to reduce the coverage. I think that's to be thought through.
And the building that nearly 90 degrees and having start facing.
Turn it this way?
Yes.
Yeah, we ran out of sites for parking. We're trying to get 90 spaces on the site. There's staff, which we have the recreation staff and the senior center staff. and the veterans. So we have a bigger staff than you would have in a typical senior center. And then we were trying to accommodate this senior citizen, so 90 spaces is the number that the traffic folks were coming up for on an average day, 5 to 10 times a year when there's a St. Patrick's Day lunch or a Thanksgiving Day lunch. We're working on a shared parking agreement with the arena to get overflow parking there for those special events, and they would collaterally have some overflow parking on their few special hockey events that need overflow parking. But the issue on the site was to put the building as tight to one side or the other as we could to get the parking in.
Side to the problem, I mean, if you twist it around and push it down.
You didn't
You
quite.
still have parking up front, but I'm just thinking it's a better organization, sort of game.
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
Stability is different.
So anyway, I'm not gonna go through the whole piece, but the big design change was the billiard room moved to the upstairs. That got the senior lounge to be bigger on the first floor, which the council on aging wanted. It got a card room on the first floor, so that's really the only big change that came out of the plans. So billiard room is upstairs. Down here you have the senior lounge, we have a game room and then the outdoor patio, which those all make some sense to be fronting on the outdoor patio. And this change here put the lounge more in the public realm as opposed to in here, the council on aging wanted that change. That's really all that changed. Any questions?
So, in the set, this is the most up-to-date set, right?
Yep.
And you show that there's a lot more details. So how many drawings are included in the set?
Well, before we got the civil and landscape, there were 25 drawings, and I think there are 8 or 10 civil, so there's somewhere between 30 and 35 drawings in the set. A lot.
And then you have outline specifications as a separate document. Is that could be sent over at the same time?
Yep.
Okay.
Did you have Joe, Brian find out what donations we?
I think we did ask and it wasn't available. Mhm.
I know the town.
I guess it went through the town to access that information, and when they asked
I'll
the
ask the town
town
engineer.
engineer,
Yeah, no, there's nothing with planning.
I thought someone asked building department.
yeah,
we-
both departments.
That's correct. But his question is go to Burbank.
Someday, I mean. My guess is that.
Yeah, we
Potentially.
we can ask. We had a meeting with them today. So we can follow up on that, but sometimes people lose those things.
But I think we need really to find out what we get out. Are their soils any different from ours? Seems to be, somebody has that information, somebody.
Could be, playing it out, though, I'm gonna suspect that that building is on pretty conventional red footing.
Then why is that on fire? That's.
But it's a different location. You still can't, it's a slightly different location. I hear what you're saying.
Maybe we should move our building first.
Here's what our building behind it, yeah. Well, I guess my point is, even if they put it on spread footings and it hasn't settled.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe anecdotally, that's good information, but ultimately. We have design professionals, or you know better than anyone. And, I mean, I agree with you hundred percent. The first thing that went through my mind was possibly surcharging the site to solve the problem. I know they've looked at that.
You know, I agree.
What are you gonna do? And so, but to your point, like reading that geotech report, even if Burbank Ice Arena is on traditional spread footings and it hasn't moved, it doesn't change anything, does it? Still gotta you still have to put that building on piles in that, on that soil at our location, so.
Let me let John and Dan go. You need them anymore?
I think we're good. Thank you. Thank you both.
Great, thank you.
Thank
night.
you. Night.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else? Any other questions on the designer, stakeholder update? Okay, the last item was, just managing project costs. And we can see, this is a little bit in response to some of John's comments. And we do have a few different things, that the building has gotten a little bit bigger, not very much. It's typical that we go, that's something that you go through during schematic design. We do a geotech report, we find something we weren't anticipating, which is gonna cost a little more money. We're gonna have to make a decision on an HVAC system that's gonna have multiple, cost price points. And we just have to all be cognizant of the fact that we should be working towards a budget, and at some point, something needs to give if we keep, we'll see what happens with the cost estimate. We should keep our eyes on creating a list of value engineering alternatives, but we do need to keep our eyes on the budget and make sure, I don't think, the project came to us as a $30 million project. And I think we should do everything we can to keep it at that, as opposed to, we had a couple of issues, it grew. I would like to take the approach that if the foundations will cost more, and if some other things cost more, that we work very hard to find alternatives that we can take out. And we want to focus on things that we can take out that have the least impact on diminishing the building.
That's why this whole cost thing was pushed up to January. We can't, it's an iterative process. It's not like you go linear and here's the cost and it's all done, so. But I think the other impact that we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, is what's the impact of tariffs? And the windows that are super affordable and energy efficient come from Europe. And those are slated to get a 25% tariff on them. So we need to sort of bring those into context with the cost estimator as we go through this process.
Well, there's a whole market. There's escalation, there's inflation, what's gonna happen tomorrow. The whole
So
ball of
I
wax
have a
that we
little
don't know.
presentation that I want to run through, and it kind of touches on all these items, because that's exactly where we're going, right?
Perfect segue.
Right, so we want to get out in front of this, and understand what the costs are so that we can move forward responsibly with directing the project to meet the goals of the community as well as, meet, the set budget that we have for it. So, we have a lot of very knowledgeable people on this committee, that are aware of, what things cost and where costs are in a project, but not everyone is. And we also have the public that, is listening in and that are ultimately going to be voting on this. So I've outlined some slides just to kind of walk through that general information of where costs really are derived from and how they impact a project. And I think this can be something that we can share then at the public forum to instruct the audience about these matters. So I guess we'll try to work through it with you, Jenna. I know that there's some hiccups in the clicking, but so yeah, essentially, when we think of a building, we have all these various building components that contribute to the cost of the project. So these percentages are shown for a similar type of building. They're going to vary from building type to building type. But this presents some understanding of what the cost impacts are for these various components. And if you click further, and those costs are all generated from the individual trades that are bidding on it. So, you know, we have labor costs that go into it, whatever the material costs are, and they have their individual overhead and profit. And then for some of the trades, there's also subcontracting work. That's part of that particular trade. So all those are rolled up, and click to the next one, into these building components, and they can be thought of also in a little more simple terms. You click through those next ones. So just keep clicking. Yeah, I think of it as like the core building, you know, you have your frame, you have your roof, then you have the remaining parts of the building, all the walls, windows, stairs, elevator. And then you have the systems, which a lot of people don't realize is a significant cost in these buildings, especially as building codes have changed. That amount has grown significantly over the years. And then finally, you have the finishes. And if you click on the next one. So the finishes are what most people think of when they walk into a building, right? Is it a nice building? Is it not a nice building? How much money was spent on it? But really, it's a very small, or roughly around 10% in that neighborhood of the overall building costs. So as we just discussed, we really want to nail down those larger building costs to understand where we are in this project and, you know, how that's going to impact the budget. So this is just building. We also have a site to consider, and that's something that also gets maybe overlooked by the general public. They think of the building, but they don't think of the costs that are associated with developing the site to put the building there. So if you can click through to the next slide. So on the site, we have, you know, similar breakdown, and that also can kind of be simplified into these more specific groups. Click on further, which is the general preparation, you know, moving around the site. Just keep clicking, it hangs up. And then finally, the finishes, which again, if you're looking at the site, what was spent on landscaping and the site furnishings. And that also represents about, just keep clicking.
Okay, just keep going. Okay.
About 10% of the site. So yeah, here you see the same breakdown for trade work. You just click through. Click. So yeah, preparation, pathways, finishes. So a similar comparison, right? So all of those build these individual components about what we're doing. But it doesn't stop there, because there are additional expenses and work to bring that all together. And that's, of course, the work of the general construction costs. So if you just keep clicking through. So that'll form the subcontract totals, but we need to add to that the general conditions, which you could think of that as the labor that the general contractor is going to use to execute the work. The general requirements could be simplified as thinking of the materials that the general contractor needs to execute the job. Then we have the cost of bonds or insurance, which is very important to protect the public in this project, right? We're going to set aside a fixed amount of money for this. If there are problems with the contractor team, we need to make sure that someone can step in and cover that. And permit fees are on this type of project usually not that large. And then of course, there's also some profit for the general contractor. So all of that kind of rolls into what we can think of as the total construction costs for the building and the site. But even with that number, there's still costs that need to go along with this project. So at this stage, we need to consider design contingency for these construction costs, because all the decisions have not been made. We've discussed a number of those items today. So we will factor in a certain amount of design contingency that's appropriate for the schematic design level. As we then move through the design phase, we will reduce that contingency all the way through to construction. And then the second piece, which was up there before, was escalation, which is a significant factor. And as we've heard on some comments already, there can be significant variables that will impact that as time moves forward. So the next thing is now we have these construction costs, but there's another factor that we talk about, and that's, well, what's the project cost, right? So a lot of times people might hear, well, this project cost this amount, the bids came in on this. That's all fine. But we need to make sure that when we reference other projects that we're comparing apples to apples. So on project costs, the additional costs associated with that are the design fees, the management fees. There's a number of miscellaneous fees that the owner will need to pay, although those generally don't add up to a significant amount of money, such as, testing costs, peer review, moving costs, things like that. And then finally, there's the contingency fees, which the contingency, usually there's two components to that. You have owner's contingency and the construction contingency, and they serve very different purposes. The owner's contingency deals with, possible overruns throughout the planning and design phase, but also things that the owner might want to add to the project that were not initially there to deliver a project for the town that's most appropriate. Sometimes those changes happen, could be administrative changes, planning changes, things like that. Then you have the construction contingency, which is the other part, and that's really reserved for things that happen based on the set of drawings and specifications that are put forth to bid. What happens after that? Well, all kinds of things can come up. We might find things in the soil that we didn't know about, things that were buried in there. There might be issues. So just hang on this slide, sorry.
Yeah,
Back
I know,
up a
I was
little
just
bit.
trying to populate it before
Yeah.
you started talking, sorry.
So that's the contingency. So next, I would just wanted to touch on, these comparative project costs, because we've heard some of these items in the public forum and feedback from people in the town. Well, there's this town, they built this for this, they built this for this. And that's important to consider, but there are a number of variables that will really differentiate what projects we're looking at. We can't just simply say, well, this project costs this amount, therefore we can expect this project also to cost this amount. So we have, is it estimated cost? Is it actual cost? Are we talking about the construction cost, or are we talking about the project cost? Was it built in 2001, or is it projected to be built in 2030? Is the facility large? Is it small? That's going to affect the square foot price, per building. And you can click on, there's a few more I think that we have in here. Is it only renovation costs? Some of the projects that were done locally were renovations versus new constructions. And is it bare bones, or is it a more involved design? And that also ties in some of these sustainability elements where we're looking to provide long-term efficiency on the building, but that has a higher upfront price. So all of those really need to be factored in to really understand an apples to apples comparison. So you can't do all of that, right? You can't get to every little detail. But what we will try to do is look at it from a closer comparative analysis. And you can click on to the next slide. Yeah, and the site, of course. Site is a big factor, as we just described right here. So, we've looked at a few dozen projects, around Massachusetts that were built at various times. These include both senior centers as well as these Center for Active Livings, where they also have other programs associated with that. If you click to the next one, please. So looking at these, we looked at how can we best compare these projects? And the main thing was that we're looking at the escalated project costs for similar building types. That really helps to narrow it down. But even with that, it's not going to account for site differences. It's not going to account for the level of building design or the level of energy performance. So we look at similar building sizes as we go forward. So what we found just looking at these projects is that renovation projects only, which is not what we're doing, had a benchmark of $640 to $988 per square foot. But to better understand those numbers, there's a big difference between before COVID and after COVID. Before COVID, significant prices were significantly lower, and that represents the lower end of that spectrum. And if you click to the next one, when we looked at new construction only, we had a range of $666 to $1,406. What that also shows us is that new construction is not necessarily significantly higher than a renovation cost. And you do add a significant lifespan to that building. So click to the next one. So once we exclude the pre-COVID construction costs, you can see that the range has jumped significantly to the higher part of that, going from 870 to 1364 per square foot. And then when we narrow it down to looking at more similar building sizes, we're looking at about 870 to 1227 per square foot off of similar building uses, new construction, post-COVID construction period, and a similar project square footage. So that gives us like a benchmark to work from. Again, it doesn't account for site differences or the level of building design. So what I would say for Reading is we probably won't be at the low end of that because we know that we have some site considerations that are going to drive the price a little higher. So when we apply the square footage that the current design is at, and click to the next one, 28,000 square feet, that gives us, you know, a probable project cost of 26.8 to 34.4 million. So that's an escalated number that includes all those factors that we've put in. And it's nothing more than a benchmark. It's not the cost of this project, but it's looking at dozens of projects in the area. What could we expect for cost for this project? And I think, you know, what you'll see is that that range, which is based on all these different projects, does kind of align with where we anticipate this to be, but this provides that level of backup. So if you can click to the next slide, please. So what I wanted to touch on here was just how things have changed significantly over time. If you start clicking through the next few ones, you know, prior to the 1940s, costs were pretty flat, right? Then, you know, as we got into the 60s and early 70s, there was continuous but slight escalation in overall consumer costs. The next phase, you know, we saw significant escalation year after year after year, and that's kind of what most of us have been used to. But if you look at the very end of that graph, following COVID, costs have just spiked. And that's the reality. So especially, that's what I was saying before, if we're looking at projects that were constructed, really priced, you know, prior to that time, they're not really a good comparison because we don't live in that world anymore. And these major changes are impacted by a number of different factors. We talked a little bit about some political decisions, right? So that could be tariffs, that could be wars that are being fought, you know, in certain countries that affect the production of certain materials. Natural disasters have a big impact because all of a sudden when things get destroyed, there's a lot of building that has to take place. So that affects the, you know, the materials that are available and also labor that's available. And then we had things like COVID, which I think none of us have experienced anything like that in our lifetime, which impacted the markets all around the world because production was shut down, transportation channels were shut down, and it created a big void for materials and labor, which then drove the costs up. So those are some of the global trends. But to better understand the cost for this project, we also need to look at more regional trends. And if you can click through here. So this graph here is available on our website. So there's a lot of project cost information available on the Turner & Townsend website. And I would recommend that people just go through and start to explore what kind of data is on there. But some of the impacts that affect our local costs are labor availability, which we continue to have a shortage of knowledgeable people in the building trades to support this work. And that has, of course, a whole history going back to education and, you know, the amount of people that went into that work. The amount of building programs in the area, which continue to be pretty strong. There's been a slight dip in private construction when the interest rates went up, but overall, building levels continue to remain strong. And local legislation, you know, there's a number of different things that get rolled into that, but I think one of the things that's driving it most now is a desire to go to more sustainable building practices and impacts on goals and energy codes that are adopted by communities. So that provides also some perspective. So like I said, we have a lot of information on our website. You're welcome to dig through that and explore that further. But I hope that that kind of sets the stage for, you know, which aspects of the building have the biggest impact on costs now, and what are some of the things that we need to be aware of as we set the budget for this project in terms of what we believe might be coming down the pipeline.
That's very helpful. Practice that, put it on YouTube. The total project costs, the final number you had, that was total project cost.
That was total.
Hi, everyone. Did the screen just go up?
Oh, screen's still down.
Okay, all right. I'm so sorry. Got it.
Thanks for checking.
IT joining us for the
And that
whole.
was escalated to projected, midpoint of construction. or
Yes, so yeah, what we do is projected to midpoint of construction. I mean, some people project it to when the bids are coming in, but we find that that's problematic because the contractors that are bidding on the job have to consider escalation for when they're going to be purchasing materials. And some of the materials are not going to be purchased toward the end of the job, which could be a year or 2 years after the bids come in for the job. So we pick the midpoint, you get a little bit of both.
The final product, not really it's an information. The people in the town, for people, they don't care. They wouldn't know how much money they would want taxes. Those
Yes.
are much more relevant. But people grasp, they can't grasp 30 million dollars. They don't know what 30 million dollars means. They do know it means an extra dollars a year. Those are real numbers that people now focus. They're not interested in this stuff.
I don't know, I disagree. I found that all very interesting, and when I am looking at the project costs and I'm looking at my tax impact, that information that I just watched was very helpful. It helps me have a more informed perspective on what things will cost and why they cost what they do.
Yeah, I agree, and it's both. It's both, and if Katie were here, I think she'd tell you that, I think there's some information on that on the frequently asked questions on the website.
The average voter will not know anything about this project until they vote. And then they're gonna say, oh my God, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because
And then see, you're a part of the system. You're one of us. Most people in town are not one of us. All they wanna know is how much will this gonna cost me and myself.
Although, if you read the Reading rant about 2 months ago, these were all the kind of things, or some of these things were what people were bringing up on the rant when it came to the project. Yeah, they're talking about taxes too, but a lot of what was covered here, it's good factual information. And people that are making comments, oh, that's too much, or don't have the background information and really shouldn't be making comments. So I don't know.
yeah, I think it's both, right? So clearly we need to communicate to the public what the impact is on their taxes. And I think one piece that's going to be important for them to understand is that, first of all, what we're describing are future costs, okay? That's a different cost than today. So that's important to keep in mind, right? We're talking about what something is going to cost in the future. The second thing is when we look at the tax impacts, we'll hopefully have a calculator to be able to, so people can look that up for their particular properties. But we should also explain that there's a likelihood that we won't be looking to take all that money at once and in 1 year. I mean, this would be something that the town will need to decide on. So even from that point, it breaks the cost down further. So of course, there's still the same impact. There's no trickery in this. But even when you look at a tax impact now, it might look more significant than it really is. Because when you start paying the taxes on that amount, is going to be years from now, and it's going to be likely an incremental increase whenever that money is borrowed. Right, so we clearly need to borrow it to build it. And we'll need to borrow some money to fund the rest of the design work, but that's not all happening at the same time.
Can I suggest that we're getting the construction costs back, you're gonna develop a budget of the total project costs, and it would be good to have that brought to the permanent building committee so that people can evaluate what's furniture, what's the audio visual, what are the commissioning costs, make sure all these things are covered, even they weren't all necessarily in your presentation, but Joe may have some idea about what they want to commission and what they don't want to commission. We have to have that conversation, because that can be if we do a HERS or we do a passive solar, a passive house project, that commissioning can be $250,000.
Yep. So we have that already. I mean, it's been drafted, but that'll need to be updated once we get the.
I'm just saying that may be something that the committee needs to look at.
Yes, that will be
Yeah,
part
I
of our
would
cost
expect when we
presentations.
see costs,
Yeah, we'll
we're
have
gonna
to.
see total project costs, not just construction costs.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Mark, did you have something?
Yeah, a couple things. So start with the piece on costs and things. The great news is that we've got a great finance department in this town that will make some decisions regarding how long we should borrow for each of these two major projects that are going on. And like you looking at a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, there's different reasons why we might make some decisions. So I think people are looking at both things. They're looking at what's the total cost and what does it mean to me? We're gonna get kind of the total cost piece, not so that how much does it mean to me yet. We're gonna do Sharon and other folks to kind of evaluate that. But the other thing that I think is very important is we do have two major projects going on. We need to make sure that we allow the community to look at them on equal basis. In other words, if one of them includes A, B, and C, and the other one includes only D, E, F, and G, it's not a way to really understand what's going on. So what I'd ask is that we talk to the OPM on the school project as well. They're prescribed in terms of how they're, I think, gonna report certain things. But let's make sure that at some point, there's a way where people can easily, without having to do any crazy calculations, just say, this one is what we're talking about, and that one is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think we can do that, once we have the costs together, because both projects will have a budget, even though they're different projects and, the MSBA is involved in others, our budgets are not gonna be that different. Like, we're gonna have a lot of the same categories in it. So we can present kind of a simplified budget that shows kind of apples to apples comparison on what all the costs are for each of the projects.
But for example, if one of them had a 25% contingency and the other one had a 10.
Yeah, so that would be outlined in that budget, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'm asking not just outlining and explaining, but making sure that there's a way for people to be able to kind of, the same way that
We could look at that, how that's compared, yeah.
I think that we won't have one project with 25%, contingency, one with 10%.
Sorry, I was just trying to draw.
Yeah, but I think what we should mostly communicate to the public is the total project cost. We can give them as much detail as possible, but for the most part, those individual line items are gonna break down relatively similar. The construction cost is gonna be X, And then everything else on top of it's gonna go about 30% more than that, plus or minus. And that's gonna be your design fees, your OPM fees, your technology, your FF&E, and your contingency. So they're gonna be relatively, obviously, they're different buildings, so there's gonna be some differences. The biggest difference is gonna be that the Killam School is gonna be a number less a reimbursement from the state, and this project will be a number. But they'll by and large, it's gonna be the same, it's gonna represent the same thing.
Yeah, I think that that's important for folks. I think that the transparency of being able to do it that way.
Yeah.
Just making it simple to understand is critical. And yes, I appreciate there are gonna be some differences along the way. I just don't want people to have to take out a calculator before they're relating it to their own taxes, but to take out a calculator to say, how do I get these numbers similar in terms of including the same things? I have to add something here, subtract something there.
Yeah.
Just put it out there. Just
Yeah.
see it.
I think this will be a focus of the communications efforts, once we get through defining this project and getting the approvals, to get all those tools in place, because, I was thinking about this discussion earlier about the tax versus the cost. Everyone's different. So me personally, like, I'm a busy person. I'm not always following everything that's going on, relative to an election. But before I make my vote, I take the time and I dig into it. And I go to wherever that project information is and I inform myself. And when we talk about costs, again, everyone has different perspectives, but there are different ways to look at it. One is, can I afford that cost personally? Is that something that, I'm comfortable with? But the other one is that a good decision? Is that the right kind of money? Are we throwing money away, or, are they trying to do a project that they're not spending enough money on and it's going to explode and become a big mess and we'll end up losing? So, those are all those variables. And I think also just providing a certain level of confidence for the public when they make those decisions, that the people that are working on these projects have done their homework and are putting forth really their best effort in understanding the costs and all the aspects of the projects that need to be considered and managed, so that they will feel comfortable. Okay, I'm willing to hand over a certain amount of money to you to do a good job with that. And I think that rolls into that as well.
That I agree with that. And to have them all have confidence that the process that we all have done has been a good process, and they can feel we've done all the stuff, nothing was shortcutted or something's hidden. Good process took place.
Yep.
And to your point, it makes sense for this community to do.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Anything else on budget and costs?
Crappy bill.
Right, like we were pointing out with the cost of the finishes, total, like around 10%.
They make so much difference to the building. Quality.
Fair point. It's difficult. For me, I'm always trying to find areas we can spend 10% more and increase the quality by 50%. Or take 10% away from something in value and realize, 50% reduction in costs. Those opportunities are there, and those are the things we should be looking at. And trying to look at. So what we don't want to do is back ourselves into a corner with bad decisions, and we get 10% reduction in costs, 50% reduction in value on a system, right? So I agree, there do become, I just saw from the slides, they become limited opportunities. Yep, okay, unless someone has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Quick vote, Nancy Toomey, John Coop, Kirk McCormick, Nancy Zimlak, Mark Foxer,
Yes.
Don Tompkins, yes, thank you all. Great job, Brian, great job.